Scientolopedia podcast. Welcome you. We're going to have some fun today. We're going to talk about a subject that is popular amongst, I can safely say popular amongst everyone. It's the concept of exteriorization. It's known by other names, which we're going to go into, and it's not an easy subject to discuss or to give some information about, but we've got a lot of information in Scientology about it, so we're going to have at it. My name is Dave LaCroix, and I'm your host, so we're going to dig right into it, and I think we'll start. I've got a few things to say. Well, I guess I should say, first of all, that we're going to have, at the end of this podcast, we're going to actually have a number of processes that basically they can be run on you in this podcast, or you can run them afterwards, but they're exteriorization processes. And they're from the early days of Scientology, L Ron Hubbard's discussion or discoveries into it and his researches. And these are processes that you can use. Now, there's a lot that you need to know. There's a lot of things we need to discuss before you just fast forward to the end of this podcast and listen to this. So be patient. You'll get the most out of it if you have the information that I'm going to give you here. So I think the first thing I'll do is let's go to L Ron Hubbard himself and hear him talking about being exterior. L Ron Hubbard.
Well, it starts like this. I was up in the Van Allen belt. This is factual. And I don't know why they're scared of the Van Allen belt, because it's simply hot. You'd be surprised how warm space is. Down amongst the clouds and so forth, it can get pretty cold and damp. But you get well up and sunlight shining around, that sort of thing. It's quite hot. And the Van Allen belt was radioactively hot. A lot of photons get trapped in that area and so forth. And I was up there watching the sunrise. Well, that was very interesting, and my perception was very good, and I was taking a look at Norway and Essex and the places around, you know, and getting myself sort of oriented.
Well, there you go. That's L Ron Hubbard from a tape. We're going to have all these references we use are going to be at the end, but that particular one is from a tape off the briefing course, the St. Hill Special Briefing Course, which was a very lengthy and detailed professional level training course for professional auditors. So he was talking to people that had a lot of familiarity with Scientology at that time. So if you're just coming out of the street and new to Scientology, or your only exposure has been some stuff off of Google or whatever, you got to understand that there is a lot of history behind that point when he was talking about that. There was from 1950 to I think that particular lecture was in 1966. But all these will be at the end of the podcast. We'll have all the links, and it'll also be on our YouTube channel on the video if you're watching this on YouTube, and it will be on the Scientolopedia website where we have all the podcasts listed as well. So the topic is a bit difficult because I guess the number one reason is we live in such a materialistic world. People have been brought up, to prize physical things, and the whole physical world is so sought after, houses, cars, vacations, all the nice toys, electronic gadgets. So all of our attention is constantly being pushed into the physical world. But as I'm going to go through, the natural state for you or I or anyone else is actually to be exterior and to not be so connected to or entrenched or absorbed with this physical world. But it's an uphill battle because not only because there's so much of it around, but down through the ages, which I'm going to go into, but there's been things that have happened to us all that have convinced us that we are simply these Homo sapien, humanoid, body individuals, and our spiritual side is been very hidden, you could say, I guess. Anyway, so the topic is a bit difficult. We're sort of swimming upstream against the prevailing, overwhelming consensus that man is a body, is a brain. When you're dead, you're dead. Or if you do have something happen after you're dead, your soul, some other part of you, will go somewhere and either enjoy or be tormented. So there's various mysteries and theories surrounding what's going on. And in Scientology, we have a lot of those answers, which is what has made it such a fascinating subject to study. But we're going to dig into it here. So some of the questions that come up about exteriorization, this is we're going to define that in just a minute. But what is it? How does it work? How do you go exterior? Who does it? Does everybody do it? Does only a few people do it? And can I do it? And when you're exterior, can you see through things? And is it like flying? These are just a couple of questions that come up off the top of my head to sort of that people have. It's a cloaked in mystery, which is the ultimate irony, because the most natural state for an individual is to be exterior, to not be inside of a body. That's a long, sad story of how that's come to be, that the vast majority of humans on this planet, at least, consider that they are a body, they're in a body. You can almost say they're trapped in a body, and they are frustrated, and people get little glimpses. They've had these exteriorization experiences. They get little glimpses that there's something else, that there could be more to all this, and yet they don't know what it is and how it happens and why and how you can resolve it. So we're going to go, there's been a lot of people that have tried to answer these questions, and we're going to throw our hat into the ring and take a stab at it. Now, exteriorization is the Scientological term. I mean, it's a English language term, but it's kind of unique to Scientology to use that term for this phenomena. Others have used out-of-body experiences, OBEs, or spontaneous OBEs. Somebody just all of a sudden finds himself outside of his body. This is somebody, an experience where someone might see their body from a distance, or see themselves from the ceiling or from elsewhere, or be able to see or hear. Now, hearing is very important too. Usually when you hear about these experiences, people are just talking about what they were able to see, as if they were viewing it with their body's eyes. But there's also audio that can happen, and sometimes that would be all that a person would experience, is just the audio. They all of a sudden start hearing something. They don't realize that that's what's occurring, is that they're exterior and they're hearing, but their visio isn't turned on. So it can go a lot. There's a lot of different combinations and ways that this can happen. But near-death experiences are another thing that's been commonly known out there. Mystic teleportation, casting, remote viewing. We did a 3-part series on remote viewing. If you don't know what that is, go to Scientolopedia or the YouTube channel for Scientolopedia and watch that 3-part series. But in actual fact, what remote viewing is, down at its most basic, is exteriorization and going and having a look. So you're not really remote. You're actually, the reviewer is actually going there. So there's misnomers and misconceptions about these things. I'll try to hit on a lot of them. By the way, there's going to be a follow-up podcast with a panel of people that are experts and have experienced exteriorization. So points that I miss in this first stab at it, we'll try to cover when we do the podcast with a panel. It's also sometimes referred to as astral projection in Eastern religions, and maybe lucid dreaming, deathbed visions. Sometimes even premonitions are actually the person has gone exterior and seen something. He knows the truck's coming around the corner, and so doesn't step out on the street. He's actually seen it, but he didn't really know that that's what had occurred, but he doesn't step out on the street in front of the truck. So there's things like that that can happen. And I mentioned deathbed visions and lucid dreaming, but I'll mention a little bit about dreams, how they get confused, because sometimes there'll be an exteriorization experience or an out-of-body experience mixed in with some other mental phenomena, which I'm going to go into here a little bit later. So you have this mashup of partly exterior, partly stuff coming from the mind, mental pictures and so forth. And then you as a being have the ability to create new ideas or new, what we call mock-ups. So if I told you right now, for example, mock up a 20-foot tall man crossing the street outside of your house. Well, most of you would be able to do that. You'd be able to come up with some sort of a mock-up of whatever you wanted to construct it as, a 20-foot tall man crossing the street outside of your house. These are called mock-ups, and you can do them. They can take any imaginable, anything imaginable can be mocked up, from spaceships to humans to animals to events. So you mix that in with the dreaming, the out-of-body experience, and the mental pictures and so forth, and mock-ups, and that's what you usually have as a mashup in dreaming. But a lot of times out-of-body experience is part of that mix. So I just wanted to mention that, solve some mystery for you possibly. But all of these kind of come under the heading of exteriorization, or they're part and related to exteriorization. There's a lot of misconceptions about exteriorization. Like, well, if you can exteriorize, like, you were listening to L Ron Hubbard, they're talking about being up in the Van Allen belt. So you must be able to, cheat at cards, and you must have full visio and sonic. Well, as I already mentioned a little bit, there's a spectrum of perceptics that one would have at any point that you might be having an out-of-body experience or going exterior. In other words, there's reasons why people don't have full visio and full sonic and not be able to read cards. And that's one of the things that Scientology auditing addresses. And as one goes up the line, that spectrum on a very, very long gradient, step-by-step process, those perceptions get more and more and more and more as one goes up the line. So you could say, he can't read cards, but he is exterior. So that doesn't make sense. But it does make sense when you understand that it's a spectrum of gradient abilities to be able to. In other words, you can be an exterior, not have any visio and not have any sonic, yet you are outside the body. You might just see black, or it might be invisible to you. Nevertheless, you could have the feeling like you're floating or flying. A lot of children have these kind of feelings. Sometimes they have a lot of visio. Sometimes they have sonic. Sometimes they just feel like they're flying. Sometimes when it happens a lot while people are dreaming, or when they have these near-death experiences or spontaneous, out-of-body experiences. They'll feel like, they're flying or something like of that sort, but not have the visio and all the perceptics. So again, it's a little bit tricky, and the misconceptions get thrown in there. Another thing that people will toss out, well, if you can exteriorize, you must be able to levitate things. I mean, they take the leap that if you have this one ability that seems extraordinary to your average human being, that if you take it and just add this one next level of being able to be outside of your body, therefore the logic follows that you must be able to levitate things. Well, theoretically, it is in fact possible or likely that at some point during our rehabilitation process of going up the Scientology bridge, that you would be able to levitate things. Again, because we've all had these abilities way, way, way back on the time track. Another whole kettle of fish there I just opened up, but the theoretical idea that we should be able to levitate is valid, but it doesn't invalidate the fact that somebody can go exterior now if they can't levitate things. So we have to be real careful how we logically follow things and don't get off onto wild expectations that aren't based on, you know, the fundamentals. We've got some basic fundamentals of what's going on and what's happening, which I'm trying to break down step by step here, and it's difficult. It's not an easy subject. If you think, well, if I already lost you, it's okay. Don't feel bad. You can come back at this or not. But it's difficult to break it all down for you. But another thing that happens is, you know, people say, well, you can't prove it, you know, and that's true. In fact, well, no, I'll bring that. I got another couple of tape excerpts, but well, let me play that one. This is because L Ron Hubbard addresses that, you know, you can't prove it. So here we go. Let me see. Yeah, here we go.
First thing we're going to take up is thetan. Now, the fact that you can't weigh one is because this is the author of weighing. The reason why you can't see one is, again, very simple, because this is the author of seeing. It's a very interesting thing. Those things which are weighed and seen stem from this source, so don't feel peculiar. Now, there is, however, a way of experiencing this. However, it is a personal attitude. It's a personal view. An individual can himself exteriorize and experience this phenomenon. And on that alone, I am afraid, depends the major part of your understanding as far as experience are concerned of it. Therefore, it's very easy to experience being a thetan. It's not easy to experience seeing one.
Right. So this prove it question comes up, and of course you've got something that can't be proven. You can only be experienced. So it's easily invalidated. It's easily poo-pooed, and you know, that happens regularly. If young little Johnny is lucky and he goes to mommy and he says, "Mommy, mommy, I can fly. You know, I was flying." And if he's got a good mommy, she'll just say, "Oh, that's nice, Johnny." You know, acknowledge him and not put him down. But Johnny goes out, gets a little older maybe, and goes out on the playground at school, tells one of his friends or some of his friends, and they go and they just savage him. You know, it's like, you know, make fun of him, bully him, put him down. So by the time he's a teenager or a young adult, he's given up all ideas of talking about his ability to fly when he's at night, when he's asleep or whatever, and these ideas, and they're sort of knocked out of him. Now, there's other things that happen as we get older, these things that we call it in Scientology key in, and I'm going to go into these case factors in a little bit that come in that limits one's abilities to do this. It's common in children because they haven't accumulated or restimulated a lot of these case factors over their life yet, and you'll see it. But we've got related to this on the Scientolopedia website. There's a page, if you just put it in the search box, called Indigo Children. It's an article about a lot of people have noticed in these generations that are coming along now about these children that are very exceptional. They're called, there's different names. I want to say children of the light, but there's another name that I'm escaping me right at the moment. But they're exceptional children. They have a perception. Sometimes they'll be savants. They'll be, you know, able to play, you know, concertos on violin or piano at the age of 2 or 3, or compose music or do just fantastic things that that are outside of what their training would have been this lifetime. And that gets into the related subject of past lives, but this is going on, and this is very common, and parents would be wise to find that article about indical children and get with a professional Scientologist and who has some understanding of what's going on there. And I already mentioned people are imagining or hallucinating. That's what, the neurosurgeons, the neurologists, and the biologists, and the experts that will be on various radio shows or write books on this subject. And they're, it's all put off as imagination. It's part of the brain, or they're hallucinating things. I should mention, too, that sometimes it happens where people take drugs and experience, from hallucinogens. Well, that's another mixed bag, like dreaming, only it's far worse, because what happens is they take a hallucinogen, they have an out-of-body experience or go exterior, but it's mixed in with a lot of other stuff that's booby-trapped on the whole track in their past, in their mind, that is going to come in on them and limit their abilities to do that without the aid of hallucinogens or drugs. So sometimes this out-of-body state can be induced, and sometimes people study it. They'll tie electrodes up to the brain and whatnot, but they're really going off on a half-cocked, wrong-sided, wrong-headed tangent there. We're going to define what's really going on here more and more as I go through this. And I already mentioned levitation. I just had a couple of things here because they're related ideas that people come up with, not only levitation, but telekinesis. So if you can go exterior, if you're outside the body, you must be able to move objects. That's telekinesis. It's very similar, mainly the same thing as levitation or similar. Well, again, theoretically, yes. In practice, no. And so people think of it as superpowers, and it adds into this invalidation concept. People that want to knock it down and say this never happened, they'll mock these things. But as we know, you don't have to go very far, but you can find that the idea of exteriorization is mentioned and talked about down through the ages in basically all religious texts, and great thinkers have written things. Once you know, like have some of these definitions and you know what to look for, you find it all over the place, even in modern writings, but also in ancient writings or old writings down through the ages. I picked a couple of ones that were real easy to find, but in the Christian religion, there's a reference in Corinthians about, I knew a man in Christ about 14 years ago, whether in the body, I cannot tell, or whether out of the body, I cannot tell. So in Islam, Muhammad supposedly had the same kind of experience. In Hinduism, of course, they talk about astral projection a lot, but I just have a quote up on the screen where this guy says, soon after death occasions the lack of physical senses. The sight of the world appears to the soul as if he were seeing it with open eyes when he was living. So there's different ways of wording it. People have different language. In Scientology, we use exteriorization and various terminology, but you can read between the lines and read translate for yourself what is being talked about down through the ages. Now, if you are interested in out-of-body experiences and you go to Google, or this was a search term on YouTube, I think it was something like out-of-body experiences, just real simple, and just comes up with page after page after page. I'm showing a few of them, but all kinds of YouTube videos and people talking about everything from meditation therapies and out-of-body experiences to astral travel, and there's radio shows and whatnot. So it's out there. People, this is not just Scientologists that are the only ones that know about it or talk about it. It's just I think we have a unique understanding or way of dealing with it, And we actually have a way to give people more and more on an increasing basis the ability to do it more and more and have it become more and more real to them. Now, it's worth it to, let's define what we're talking about when we say exteriorization. But first, where did I put it? Did I misplace it? I put it in wrong sequence. I wanted to define what a thetan is, first of all, because we use that term a lot. And basically, it's the individual who handles and lives in the body. Now, I'm on this definition. These are from the Scientology Technical Dictionary, and I'm going to have to give you what an HCOB refers to, a Hubbard Communication Office Bulletin. So these are technical bulletins that L Ron Hubbard wrote, and a lot of these definitions come from that. They come from tape lectures or books. But it's the spirit, and it's defined in Scientology as having no mass, no wavelength, no energy, no time or location in space, except by consideration or postulate. Postulate is a decision or determination one makes. Now that's a mouthful, what I just gave you. And you're going to maybe want to come back to this or go to these reference books and materials. But again, it's the spirit, or the thetan, is described in Scientology as having no mass, no wavelength, no energy, no time or location in space, except by consideration or postulate. The spirit is not a thing. It is the creator of things. You heard L Ron Hubbard on that other tape reference I just did a minute ago say that. So the thetan, being you, that is you, and you have certain characteristics. You don't have any mass, you have no wavelength, you have no energy, and no time or location in space, except if you decide. That's where the consideration comes in. If you decide you have a location in space, that's your postulate. That's why you consider yourself to be in a body, in a head. So I know that's a big bunch there, but I wanted to try at least take a stab at defining what a thetan is, because we use it a lot. It's the personality and beingness which actually is the individual and is aware of being aware, and is ordinarily and normally the person and who the individual thinks he is. The thetan is immortal and possessed of capabilities well in excess of those hitherto predicted for man. That came from the book Scientology 88008. The previous reference was from the book Fundamentals of Thought, FOT. It stands for Fundamentals of Thought. Those books are all available at Scientolopedia.org. So we've got the individual himself. It's you. That's who you are. That's what we're talking about when we say thetan. You have certain characteristics that have been very precisely laid out here as far as what your characteristics are. So it's not, when you talk about astral travel, it's a bit, of a misnomer when they say, he put his astral self out into the other room or something. It doesn't work that way. It's you. If you go and look something in the other room, then you've gone and looked at it. So I'm going to back this up because I had them out of sequence. But now we want to talk about, what are out-of-body experiences? The out-of-body experiences are what I already mentioned. That's the common layman term for what we're talking about with exteriorization. Now, when we say exteriorization, we're talking about the state of the thetan, the individual himself, being outside his body. When this is done, the person achieves a certainty that he is himself and not his body. This is how you get a certainty that you are yourself, not your body. That's from the Phoenix Lectures. Now, the next one, I'm going to play this tape in just a second, but this is a definition from the tape, and then we'll play it. The phenomena of being in a position or space dependent upon only one's consideration When you decide where you want to be, that's your consideration. So if you decide you're going to be in the room next, in the other room in the house, that's where you can be at a certain point when you gain that ability. That's an ability. So don't feel bad if you can't do that right now. These are abilities that are attainable. So the phenomena of being in a position or space dependent upon only one's consideration, able to view from that space the body and the room as it is. That is exteriorization. One can view the body or control the body from a distance. Let L Ron Hubbard say it for you.
But the phenomena of exteriorization takes place rather easily today in Scientology. We fought for this hard in 1952. There have been numerous methods of exteriorizing people, and all of them, because they are directly addressed to exteriorization, have definite liabilities, and exteriorization is not a stable fact. Exteriorization is the phenomenon of being in a position or space dependent upon only one's consideration, able to view from that space the body and the room as it is. That is exteriorization. One can view the body or control the body from a distance.
Okay. I was trying to bring this back up and I don't know why it doesn't want to do it. There we go. Okay. So that's what we just read. That's what you just heard. If you need to hear that again, you can just rewind or back up this recording and you'll have it. Now, there's some barriers to going to exteriorization because you're already saying, well, yeah, but I can't do it, or why can't I do it, or all these thoughts come in. Can't be true because I can't do it. Well, there are reasons why. Now, L Ron Hubbard was talking about in 1952, they had many, many different methods to exteriorize somebody. So if that were the totality of what Scientology was going to pursue, which it actually is, by the way, ultimately, but if it were that easy to get people to be exterior and that was all there was necessary, is just run these exteriorization processes, L Ron Hubbard's research would have just stopped right there. There would have been no point of going any further because he had it. But the fact is, he realized very soon in the game that there were other factors that come in. There's more to this mental stuff that keeps people from being able to exteriorize or stay exterior, or really have all the perceptics. Well, we sort of the slang today is sort of like OT. We use that term, operating thetan. But the idea being that ultimately one should be able to operate outside of the body with full perception, and then theoretically move on from there to the other abilities outside of the body. Well, he quickly discovered, or had, all these other things that come in, first of which, not the least of which I should say, is mental image pictures. A thetan, a being, has been taking pictures his entire existence in dealing with this physical world, and that goes back a long, long way. The true cosmology of the universe is a fascinating subject, and is part and parcel of understanding how to be exterior and stably stay exterior. Is one must also understand the cosmology of the universe and what we call the whole track, your whole existence down through the eons of the physical universe, and the fact that you've taken mental image pictures all along the way. It was early on proved in Dianetics that a person takes these pictures, the recordings are available to them, and even while unconscious. So you have this situation somewhat of a tragic situation, one could say. But down through the eons, many tragic things have happened to all of us. We've taken those pictures and they're stored and they're available. So a person goes exterior and they can get restimulated. They can be brought back. So those pictures either come in and they trick the thetan into thinking he's looking at the environment when actually he's looking at a picture that he took, or the unpleasant experience is re-stimulated in him and he's now going to re-experience that, the unpleasantness of being exterior. So it gets tricky, and the only thing that eliminates those things is auditing. But through the process of auditing, one's control over mental image pictures and these mental items that the thetan has stored down through millennia are eliminated, or he gains control over them so that he can be exterior with perceptions and not have anything kick in on him. I have a number of other things listed here. Circuits are those little, the little voices that you hear, or songs that won't quit. The stupid little jingles from a commercial or something that plays over and over in your head. Those are circuits, but there's many different types of circuits. And these are things that are on automatic, not under your control. And again, they can sort of snap in. A lot of these are elastic. So a person goes exterior, and then one of these phenomena, parts of the mind, sort of pulls them back in, you could say. Now, anybody that's had any familiarity with Dianetics knows about engrams, secondaries, and locks. Locks are the more recent, sort of a reminder of an unpleasant incident. Secondaries are losses, painful emotional incidents that have happened to us all. And engrams, which contain pain and unconsciousness. So these sort of stack up all the way down the whole track forever, or seemingly forever. And they're there waiting to sort of, again, be an elastic, snap the person back into the body. And in a minute, we're going to go into how Dianetics remedies this in auditing so that it doesn't happen when somebody goes in exterior in auditing, that these factors don't keep having an adverse effect on them. Another one that comes in is valences. These are synthetic personalities. These are people who were sympathetic or were somehow identified in a aberrative A=A fashion to your survival at some point. They were like a personality that helped you when you were in distress, and you go into that valence, whether it's mom or dad or a friend or a cousin or an uncle or a boss or somebody you knew. You find yourself acting and behaving and doing things like them. Those are valences, and those are part of this package of mental stuff that can pull a person back in. Likewise, mental masses and pressures. These have various components, what they're made up of. Pressures are psychosomatic things that happen on the body, aches and pains and so forth, that can be alleviated through auditing, but they are a hindrance to one's ability to be exterior to the body. Likewise, there's demons, other beings, ghosts. People are freaked out sometimes about ghosts, but they're just thetans. We've used that term, thetans, who are outside a body or have no body. And so somebody goes exterior and they encounter a ghost, and he's maybe not not Casper the friendly ghost, and might say boo and scare him back into his body. So these are things that are out there that one comes to know more and more as he gets more and more auditing and goes up the bridge. But they're just a whole, literally a host of things that L Ron Hubbard ran into as he was doing his research and making his discoveries that affected a person's ability to be stably exterior with full perception. Now, I have this item, analytical overlay. This is not a Scientological term. It's what in the podcast series that I did on remote viewing, it's a 3-part series, and one of the things they found in the remote viewers would they'd be looking at a target or trying to identify a target where it was, a location or a person or some object or whatever, and in the process they'd be maybe writing things down or drawing sketches, but other pictures or mental image pictures would come in, or these circuits or these engrams or these valences, masses and pressures and those type of things would come in. They didn't know all this technology or these terminologies. They didn't know all, in the remote view experiments, they didn't know all of these, different mental phenomena. So they just lumped it under as analytical overlay, as skewing the viewer's ability to identify what he was looking at. He'd have a little piece of it, and then all this other mental stuff would come in and sort of confuse it, make it confusing. Likewise, like dreaming, I mentioned, a person has a dream, and part of that might be being exterior, but then there's these pictures and circuits and engrams and secondaries and mock-ups and masses and pressures, and he doesn't know what's going on. He's looking at this stew, and he wakes up and says, oh, I had a nightmare, or I had a weird dream about blah, blah, blah. And so it's this mixture. That's all. All right. Now, what is happening is you've had experiences in your life where you felt, either exterior, or you've had similar related experiences of having a lot of space, feeling really big and free. Well, there's a datum in Scientology where space is beingness, or space equals beingness. So when you have if you've been up to the top of a mountain or a tall building or an airplane, or if you've lucky enough to have been on the International Space Station looking down at the planet, you've felt a great deal of space and a bigger beingness. We use the term beingness, meaning how you feel about yourself is your beingness. And that varies when you're very introverted into a work project, or maybe, let's just say, an unfortunate loss in your life, or you're driving down the freeway and trying to navigate changing lanes. Your beingness is smaller, it's focused, or whatever. But you get up in an airplane or a mountain or the space station, and you have this sense of broad, wide expanse. So the thetan considers that he's got unlimited space, and when he's got that feeling of unlimited space, he can be exterior. And so that's very much related to all this phenomena about exteriorization. Now, what we run into, what we deal with that seems to be a barrier, is this physical universe. It seems very solid. Well, anybody that's studied physics and knows anything about, the atomic structure of things knows that there's a lot of gaps between these atomic molecules, that there's space. It's not always, they're not completely condensed. What you have when you have a solid is it's a condensed energy. Energy has collided. Energy is either a flow, a ridge, or dispersal. That's a whole subject for another talk probably. But when energy flows and then it impacts another opposing energy flow, then it collides, and because of positive and negative and so forth, they stick, or they coagulate, and they become a solid. And that's what you're looking at when you look at a brick wall, a chair, the floor you're standing on, the walls. There's a lot of space. You come up the line and you get more and more attuned as a spiritual being, as a thetan. You can actually get so you can see through those objects. If I told you to right now, you could see through one of the walls in the room. You'd get a sense that you were able to do that. Pretty sure most people would be able to get that sense. Like I said, we're going to run some exteriorization processes later, and there's going to be a whole spectrum of different people are going to have different reactions to those processes. from the level of your perceptions are going to be it's a wide variety. From it's going to be all black or invisible to sort of a sense that you can sort of begin to kind of sense something, to a lot of people are going to pop out and they're going to have visual, maybe even sonic. So anyway, the physical universe is not as solid as it appears. Let's just leave it at that. Now, in auditing, in Scientology, a lot of people tell the story of their first thing they ever did in Scientology was they come in, they sit down, they're doing some what are called training routines or training drills, TRs they're called. And a lot of people went exterior on those drills. They're very, it's very simple, very, very powerful though. Others, there's a set of processes called objective processes, and a lot of people get those early on. And again, they experience exteriorization. So a lot of people have had this experience in Scientology, but they've had it elsewhere too. When it comes up in auditing, when auditing has caused someone to go exterior, which to a greater or lesser degree, you could say that every auditing session that is done right results in at least some form of exteriorization. Now that, what I mean by that is the end result of an auditing session, the person feels good, he's happy, he's had a realization about life, he feels more expansive, he's exterior from the whatever introversion he was in when he came into session or that he went through in the session. So it's a gradient scale of how exterior someone might be, but it often occurs that someone does go full-blown exterior in session. If the auditor recognizes it, he'll hear the person say, well, I'm outside the body, but they don't always say that so blatantly. They say, I feel like I'm floating, whatever it is, but the auditor will normally just end the session at that point, let the person enjoy that experience. But because of all those factors I talked about earlier on the mental factors from mental image pictures and the engrams and so forth, this action of going exterior and auditing can sometimes re-stimulate some of those things in the mind afterwards. They're happy when they went exterior and they go home, and then the next day they come back and they've got what we call a high TA. That's on the E-meter that's used in auditing. It's just a needle setting that indicates that something is not the way you want it. I won't go into more technical detail on that, but it gives the auditor an indication that, something is not quite right today. He was doing good yesterday. Now there's something not quite right. Or the PC might have what we call red tagged after the session. After an auditing session, the PC goes and gets PC. When I say PC, it's pre-clear, the person getting audited. The PC goes and gets an exam. He's just checked, was on a meter by someone else, by another person, just to sort of cross-check the auditor, how the auditor is doing. Well, if the TA is, again, the tone arm on the meter is not quite right, or the person is saying now he doesn't feel so good or whatever, then that's not good. So immediately that examiner takes the folder, puts a red tag on it, meaning that auditor has to get back with this PC immediately on an immediate basis within 24 hours to fix whatever is wrong. I already said that sometimes PCs originate, they feel light, they feel spacey, whatever, and the auditor has to recognize that. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. And once we address it there's a remedy for all of this that I'm going to go into in just a minute, then there's no longer any of these difficulties related to going exterior in session. Sometimes the person might immediately or somewhat later get a headache. They might feel massy. When we feel massy, we mean they're kind of like clogged up mentally, fogged. Everything's heavy inside your mind, and you're just not able to it's sort of a struggle to think. Everything seems heavy and foggy to you. Yeah, I'm sure you've had that experience of feeling massy. But after a good auditing session, that shouldn't occur unless something needs to be fixed. Now, out in life, people go exterior, obviously. There's out-of-body experiences, or maybe they're just happy Joe and they go exterior, like these spontaneous out-of-body experiences. Well, they can also pull in these same symptoms, and they might not recognize that there's a relation to it. Like they got up in the morning, they felt great, they went out on their car, they're driving, they're feeling great, and then later on in the day, they get a headache and so forth, and they feel massy. They don't recognize that they had been exterior, and now they're sort of re-stimulating things that are coming in on them. But sometimes they'll be exterior, a person will be exterior, and they'll start tripping on things. They'll feel a little spacey. They might word it as they don't quite feel themselves. They might feel forgetful. So there's a lot of little different symptoms that can go on. Even the worst, like headache and so forth, they will dissipate within a matter of, usually a few days at the most. But it's unpleasant. Who knows you should get it handled in auditing. So I'm going to go through how it's addressed in auditing, but just keep in mind, this is very technical. I'm going to do my best without the help of real good graphics, but I'm going to try to explain to you how auditing technology is very sophisticated in dealing with this. And once dealt with, the person can get audited till the cows come home and go exterior all they want, and they won't suffer these bad repercussions of having gone exterior. So there's a fix, in other words. Now, I also want to make the point that auditing did not cause the bad experience. Let's say if somebody gets a headache after going exterior in session, that doesn't mean that auditing is dangerous. What it means is the person has had this, before they ever had any contact with Scientology, they had the stuff, the mental stuff, sitting there that could give them the headache that would be a barrier to them going exterior before they ever walked in the door of a Scientology organization. All that happened with auditing is there's an auditing process caused or was the impetus for the person going exterior. Then that stuff that was already there gets keyed in, and now auditing can get rid of that mechanism that keys in to keep the person from being able to go exterior without any side effects, you could say. Because let's remember, exteriorization is the natural, normal state we should all be in. It's not this exceptional or unusual or, unique thing. We were all exterior before we had bodies. It's a natural state. It's what Scientology does. It gives us back that freedom to be exterior. So it's a good thing. And if you go exterior in auditing, that's a good thing. The fact that it keys in some things that have been there forever, for eons, for millennia, is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a condemnation of auditing at all. I just have to say that because there's so many misnomers. People just take this. See, they'll say, see, I told you, Scientology. It does all these bad things. It doesn't. Anyway, there's I've got up on the screen there's a rundown, there's 16 bulletins dedicated if you've ever seen those red volumes, there's like a dozen red encyclopedic type volumes of all the technical bulletins written about how to handle the mind and spirit by L Ron Hubbard. 16 of those, one special rundown deals with exteriorization, and it's called the Interiorization Rundown. I'm going to explain that, but there's 16 of them. It's very precise technology that handles these phenomena. I'm not going to explain all the little abbreviations and stuff on this page. They're parts of all these bulletins, and you can get those at Scientolopedia. They're all defined. Now, I just mentioned interiorization. This rundown is often referred to as the INT, or Interiorization Rundown, or the Exteriorization Rundown. We have both sides. Obviously, if somebody exteriorizes out of something, they had to have gotten into it. So there's the interiorization and then the exteriorization. Now, it's important to keep in mind part of this technology, and this is where it's going to maybe twist your mind a little bit, but try to follow this. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. But before the person went exterior, let's say in the auditing session, he had to have gone interior. He had to have gone into something. So that's why it's referred to an int rundown. And likewise in the handling, the solution to unraveling all these difficulties is that one fact that the person had to have interiorized into something before he had troubles or difficulties with exteriorization. Let's define it again. This is in a new, this is also from that Interiorization Rundown Series 1. Exteriorization is defined as the act of moving out of the body with or without full perception. It is the fact of this act which proves that the individual is not a body but an individual. This discovery in 1952 proved beyond any question the existence of a thetan, that the individual was a thetan, not a body, and disproved that man was an animal, and proved that he was a spiritual being, timeless and deathless. So the proof that you are a spiritual being, timeless and deathless, is the fact that you can go outside your body. Well, that's pretty profound, but we take it sort of for granted in Scientology. All right, so from another, this is from the series 9 of that issue, or that series of Interiorization Rundown series. This quote, people exteriorize in any normal auditing. What was needed was a remedy to be able to audit them thereafter without driving their TAs up. In other words, their tone arms, without having all those undesirable effects get in the way of future auditing. We want people to be able to go exterior, enjoy it, and come back, do it again. Do it again and again and again, get better and better and better at it. So this problems of the TA going up was an impediment to that. It caused extra work and extra effort. Maybe people had to wait, or they didn't even. One of the other side effects of this going exterior and having these bad effects is people will tend to not want more auditing. They think that, well, that was kind of unpleasant because they got a headache after they went exterior. Well, better that we can solve it and then they don't have to deal with that anymore. Now, again, this gets a little bit technical, but this is from, again, that series 1, and I'm going to try to just simplify this by saying, I mentioned a minute ago that the person went interior before he ever went exterior and had problems. On the whole track, we've had all kinds of incidents. If you don't want to subscribe to the fact that you've lived before this life, that's fine. But just bear with me. On the whole track, people have gone exterior and boom, or maybe forced exterior. They were flying a spaceship and they ran into an asteroid and kaboom, they got vaporized. So there they are, exterior. Or tremendous pain and suffering when they were held in jail or held captive or whatever. All kinds of unpleasantries have happened to all of us, believe it or not, unfortunately. But here we are today, listening to my podcast. Anyway, the fact is they had to have gone in before they got out. And the technology of Dianetics is used to erase those unfortunate incidents of having gone in or out, that chain of events all down through the whole track that keeps the person or brings in those unpleasant headaches and phenomena that happen when he goes exterior today in present time in an auditing session. That's about as simple as I can explain it without really confusing you more and making it more complicated than it really needs to be for the purposes of this podcast. The fact is that once remedied, once fixed with this special rundown, person can come back in, get auditing, and go on up the bridge, go more and more exterior every day, every time, to his heart's content. So it's a phenomenal breakthrough. It's phenomenal technology. If, by the way, you have had this difficulty, you feel like that might have happened to you or it's not been fixed properly, you can type in the search. I'll have a link on the end of this podcast or on the website to my page. I do this professionally. I either come here to Nashville, where I'm based out of, or in some cases we can handle it remotely over something like Skype. But in either case, I'm totally willing and able to help you with that if you're interested. Now, the reason I have this definition of Black 5 up is going to be used. We're going to wrap up into the final. We're on the home stretch here. We're almost done. We're going to get to, I'm going to play a tape in a minute with L Ron Hubbard talks about some exteriorization processes. And so you'll have those. You can make notes or you can play it over again, and you'll have those to try if you like, if you're up to it. You know, should put a disclaimer, parental, you know, what do they say on shows? Viewer discretion advised. Now you have a license to do whatever you want with your universe. All these talk about things that can go wrong or why people can't exteriorize are just so you have the information. It's not a secret. But L Ron Hubbard is going to give a number of processes, and then after that concludes, I'm going to run a process as if you were here in the room, and I'm going to give you an exteriorization, run an exteriorization process on you. So you'll have that one too. But after I do that, I'm just going to quietly end that process and then end this podcast without much further talk or trying to explain anything else. I'm just going to let you digest it, and then you can enjoy it, hopefully. But just keep in mind, like I said earlier, that people experience varying degrees of perception when they go exterior, from it's all black, like this Black 5 situation. By the way, there's nothing wrong with the Black 5. We can handle it very easily with standard auditing. It's just a lot of people you find don't have, they just see a black field or everything's invisible. They don't have the perceptions. You know, if you ask them to look at their breakfast and tell you what they had, they might be able to tell you what they had, but they wouldn't see the pictures of it. So it's called a Black 5. It's not really so much a terminology that's used anymore, but L Ron Hubbard uses it in this next lecture. So I just wanted you to have that. Try to eliminate as many what we call MUs, misunderstoods, as possible. All right, so I think that's it. I'm going to give you the go right into that tape, and like I say, we'll have a follow-up podcast with a panel. So subscribe to this YouTube channel or keep an eye on the Scientolopedia podcast page. Join our Facebook. We have a Facebook page and we have a Facebook group. The group has over 600 people in it. A Facebook page, you can like and follow that. Things are updated on there. You can search for the group under Scientology Outside the Church, Scientolopedia. And we have a Twitter. It gets posted on there, and this YouTube channel. All right, so I'm going to say thank you now. I'll say it again, but we're going to go into L Ron Hubbard giving some exteriorization processes.
One of the early mechanisms of exteriorization was simply to get the guy to change his ideas in this fashion. I can control this body, I can't control this body, I can control this body, I can't control this body, I can control this body. Just get him to run those two alternately, one after the other, and blong, he'll go out of his head. Of course, he'll come back in, too. People who've never been out of their heads will go out on that one. The task in Scientology today, however, is not getting people out of their heads. You could exteriorize yourself simply by grabbing your head with your two hands and keeping your head from going away. You go out of your head. I mean, it's as easy as that. Now, if you want to be a little more definite about it, why, grab hold of your knees and grab hold of your head and Keep your knees from going away, keep your head from going away, keep your knees from going away, keep your head from going away, keep your knees from going away, keep your head from going away. That's just shift your attention so that you won't get too fixated. I don't know how many hours you might spend at it, but in the final analysis, you would go out of your head, that's for sure. Zong. Now, how good your perception would be, that's another question. How willing are you to see, look? You might go out of your head and just be totally lost and dumbfounded. Well, there'd be nothing wrong with that either, as far as that's concerned. But any phenomena which occurs beyond the point of willingness to be out of the head or control a body from a distance is regulated by the scarcity and abundance of bodies and universes. And if you can't see your body, then there's a scarcity of them. If you can't see the universe, then there's a scarcity of that. And that's all there is to that. As far as getting somebody out of his head is concerned, this is almost a kid trick now. The earliest technique on this still works. Try not to be 3 feet back of your head. You're allowed to be there. It still works. About 50% of the population gets 3 feet back of their heads simply by being told to be 3 feet back of their heads. They can't help themselves because somebody else can always exteriorize a person more easily than he himself can. Obviously, he has been overwhelmed so often by other determinism that it is more effective upon him than his own. So an auditor walking up to somebody saying, be 3 feet back of your head, is very likely to pull it off. Very likely to pull it off. It's other direction. The person really wouldn't even have to know what the auditor was talking about to obey this command at once. That's because on the whole track, the adventures of a thetan include being banged out of many heads. Here's exteriorization. Keep your head from going away. Take your hands, hold on to your head, and keep them going away. There you go. I don't know how many hours it'd take with some pre-clears. Probably a black 5 would have to sweat along at this 15 or 20 hours before he really was there. But he would get there on that one technique. That's quite amazing, isn't it? Now that's what we call advance. There are probably about 5,000 other techniques. Some of them quite unreliable, some of them pretty good, some of them fair. And this is the only shotgun one that I know, the one that doesn't ever fail. It's only contingent upon one thing, being able to take hold of your head. That is a necessary prerequisite to that technique.
All right. So, little L Ron Hubbard humor there. He mentions if you can take hold of your head, then you can do those processes. Well, we have arrived. I'm going to run a process on you. You probably should be in somewhat of a mood especially after listening to that last bit of L Ron Hubbard describing those processes. You can always rewind this or back it up and listen to that again and write those down if you want to have those as part of your repertoire. I'm going to give you one now. I'm going to run as if you were here, and then, like I said, I'll just end off smoothly, and we'll hopefully see you on down the road at our future podcasts, and feel free to comment here or at the Scientolopedia site. So for this process, I'm going to have you take a hold of some things, and when I say take a hold of, I mean mentally. So you're in a room. Most rooms are rectangular, could be square, could be oval, could be round, it doesn't matter, but you have a surface of the wall on the right, and to whatever it is, if it's oval or round, just take that surface of that wall, consider that wall to your right, and I want you to take a hold of it. So take a hold of that wall on the right, and then now we want to take a hold of the wall on the left. So that surface that's to your left, want to add that to taking a hold of the wall on the right and take a hold of that wall on the left. Now there's a surface behind you, the wall behind you. I want you to take a hold of that surface, get a good grip of it, and add that to the wall on the right, the wall on the left, and the wall behind you. And now we're going to take a look at and grab a hold of the surface in front of you, the wall or surface that's in front of you. Take a hold of that. So you're holding the wall on the right, the wall on the left, the wall behind you, and the surface wall in front of you. And now we're going to take the ceiling. We're going to grab a hold of that surface, the ceiling above you. So we've got the wall on the right, the wall on the left, the wall behind you, the wall in front of you, and the ceiling. We're holding all of those. All right. Now we're going to take a hold of the floor. Now make the floor disappear. All right, that's the end of that process. Thank you very much. And that's another Scientolopedia podcast. Thank you for joining us. Find her Twitter, Facebook, YouTube channel. Go to the Scientolopedia website and support us if you can. We look forward to seeing you here again very, very soon. Goodbye.